Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today's video is a little bit of a different one. So in case you didn't know, I make my own sewing patterns and sewing tutorials for how to make your own guinea pig beds. So if making your own guinea pig cozy beds is something you want to get into, you're definitely in the right place. There's 3 in the series so far, and I am super excited to be sharing with you the release of my 4th one, which is what I call the Slipper Snug. There's actually one behind me in the cage right now, but let's take a sneaky leap forward in time and look at the finished one that we're about to make together. So as you can see, it's quite a large cozy bed, and it's one of my most popular designs. They have these lovely wide open entrances, which means it's easy to see our piggies relaxing inside, but they still feel safe and snug in there with a roof over their heads. So cute. So we're going to run through step by step how to create your very own Slipper Snug, and just like with my other sewing tutorials, the exact pattern that I'm using today is now available to print at home, complete with a set of detailed written instructions, and it's in my Etsy shop right now, so I'll pop the link to it in the description. That said, there's nothing to stop you following these instructions with a pattern that you've designed yourself. You'll need some basic sewing supplies for this tutorial, so paper and a printer if you're using the printout pattern, scissors and a tape to assemble your pattern pieces, as well as sharp fabric scissors, pins, polyester or cotton thread, and a hand sewing needle. A sewing machine isn't completely necessary for this tutorial, though it will of course make things a lot faster. In case you're interested, I have a Janome J324, which I would highly recommend as it is very good at going through thick materials. And as well as our sewing supplies, we'll need some fabrics to make our Slipper Snug out of. First up is the material for the top arch and the front curve of the bed. You can use cotton or fleece for this, but today I'll be using this adorable minky fabric with these sleepy bedtime piggies on. And then for the lining layer on the inside of the bed, I'll be using this lovely cream fleece. And I'll also be using fleece for the outer base and back of the bed. So I'm going to use this light blue fleece just so it's easier for you to differentiate between the lining and that one. And then we also have the middle layer, which like my other beds, I'll be using polyester wadding or batting for. I'll be using nice thick 14-ounce wadding for the front curve and top arch, and either 6 or 9-ounce for the back and the base. If you want your bed to feel really sturdy and strong, go for nice thick wadding. And the wadding is good to use straight away, no preparation needed, but you should pre-wash any cottons and also pre-wash any fleece if it's not soaking away liquid. You can put a bit of water on it to test. If it beads up and just sits on the surface, then it needs pre-washing. Step 2 is getting our pattern ready. If you're using my downloadable printable pattern, go ahead and print the pages actual size onto normal A4 paper. Then just cut around the outer thick black line and stick the pieces together, covering over the flaps marked "Cover Me Over" in the order indicated. You'll end up with 4 pattern pieces: the front curve, the top arch, the back panel, and the base. Step 3 is cutting out our materials. Each Slipper Snug is made up of 12 pieces of fabric in total, 3 of each pattern piece in your chosen fabrics. So that's 1 full set in wadding, another full set in fleece or whichever lining material you're using, and for me, as I mentioned, I'm doing 1 base and 1 back panel in light blue fleece for the outer layer, and then the other 2 outer layer pieces are my Piggie minky fabric for the curve and the top arch. To cut out your materials, lay the pattern piece down on top of the fabric, pin around the edges, and cut around it using your fabric scissors or a rotary cutter if you're a pro. When pinning and cutting, be careful to not let the fabric bunch up. Keep it nice and flat. With all of our pattern pieces cut out, we're ready for our first proper sewing step, and in this one we're going to create the curved side seams of the bed that hold the front curve and the top arch together. And we're first going to be working with the outer layers before combining the middle and lining layers together. So grab your outer front curve piece and place it right side facing up like this. The right side being the correct side of the fabric we want to be on show in the finished bed. And then, remembering the rule, right sides together, together, line up this corner of your outer top arch piece with this bottom corner of the front curve. Make sure you get the corners orientated correctly. And then we're pinning these two edges together. It is a curved seam, so try to allow for one side feeling like there's a bit of excess fabric and spread it out as evenly as you can. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side to make a kind of loop of fabric from our outer pieces. Once they're both pinned, we'll carefully sew these seams with a basic running stitch, leaving a seam allowance of around 1 centimetre or whatever you prefer really. As long as you keep the seam allowances roughly consistent, the bed will come out just fine. We'll then go ahead and do the same process but for the middle and lining layers in combination. So pop your wadding curve down, place the fleece lining layer on top, right side up, then holding the two middle and lining top arch pieces, line up the same corner as you did the first time around. It can be a little bit tricky, but focus on lining up the fabrics where you want to pin and capturing all 4 layers of fabric with your pins. Don't worry if the rest of the material is just flapping about doing its own thing. So again, same on the other side, and this is what they should look like all pinned together. Then go ahead and sew where you've pinned to make the seams. With this one, I like to trim back a bit of that bulky wadding from the seam because it will help avoid any lumps and bumps in your finished bed. Someone wants veggies. Okay, so we're making good progress here. We have our 2 sort of loops of fabric, and in this step we are going to add our back panels on. So we're joining the long edge of the top arch to our semicircle bit on our back panels. And this is where my light blue bit of fleece comes in, because this is not going with the middle layer. This is the outer layer, so it's gonna go on the back of my patterned bit, so it will be seen on the outside back of the bed, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, it will do. So first take your outer loop and we'll be pinning the back panel from each corner like this. Again, make sure your right sides are together and spread the pins out well to start with before filling in the gaps and readjusting any if you need to. Once pinned, it should look something like this. Sew along this edge and that's one back panel done. Next up, taking the lining and middle loop, it's the same process, except we're also incorporating the middle back panel this time, sewing 4 pieces of fabric together. As you're pinning, remember right sides of the fleece together and make sure you're capturing all 4 layers with your pins. You should end up with something like this, ready to sew on the machine or by hand. And again, I like to go in with my scissors and just cut a little bit of the bulk off this seam, just tidy it up a little bit. Okay, so at this stage we have 2 rather lovely but very separate slipper snugs taking shape, and this step is a good one because we are going to combine all 3 layers and sew what will become the entrance of our bed. First up, I'm going to take my chunky lining and middle version of my bed and I'm going to turn it inside out so that the lining, which in my case is my cream fleece, it is on the outside of the bed, and just neaten it up a little bit, get those fabrics in line, and then taking your outer bed, don't turn this one inside out, leave it as it is with the right side facing in, and you're going to sort of tuck it up and over your other bed. It might need sort of manhandling into shape. Try and line up these seams. So that's these side seams, this seam along the back, and then also along the bottom. Try get them all in line, and you'll probably find that they try and maneuver themselves out of place as well. If you have everything fairly neatly lined up, then you can adjust these as you pin all around this entrance as well, which is what we're going to do next. Start by popping in a couple of pins at the side seams, then work on joining them up from either side, pinning all around what will become our entrance. And you can be even more flexible with your seam allowance here. If it feels like the fabrics don't want to line up exactly, then don't worry about it. Just make sure you're capturing all 3 with your pins and you can trim away any excess afterwards. Step 7, and in this one we're going to attach our inner base pieces to our inside half of the bed. So we do still want to treat the outer and inner as 2 separate sections for now, and to do that I am just going to turn the whole thing inside out and then let the outer part just fall away through the entrance there. So we are just looking at the right side of our lining. Take your middle and lining base pieces, put them together with the right side of the lining facing out. Taking these two pieces, face them in towards the rest of the bed, line up this straight seam at the back and start to pin all 4 layers along this edge. If you're sewing on the machine, I recommend pinning the back half of the bed from the bottom up, whereas it will be easier to sew the front curved section from the side, which is why I pin it from the side like this. Then go ahead and sew all around the base, repositioning the bed to do the second half. And again, I like to trim down the seam to neaten it up a bit. So now we have a sort of completed inside out half and then this random saggy bit hanging out the other end. And our next step is essentially repeating step 7 but attaching our last remaining piece, which is our outer base. So start by lining up this straight seam at the back and remember right sides together. I'm doing the same as before and pinning the front curve from the side and the back half from the bottom. Now when you go to sew this, remember to leave a generous gap at the back. I'm not going all the way around, I'm leaving a good 2 to 3 inches here in the middle of the back seam. Our next step is turning the whole bed inside out, pushing everything through that hole that we left. It will definitely come out a bit of a funny shape at first, but just work at realigning those seams with each other all around the bottom, the curved side seams and the entrance, and it will start to look like a proper shaped bed. Okay, the bed is almost finished now. We just have that pesky little hole to patch up, and if you want to make it look super neat and invisible, you can use what's called a hand sewn slip stitch. Just tuck the excess inside, carefully pin it closed and take a tiny bit of fabric from each side at a time with each stitch, going back on yourself if you want to. Or you can just pin it like we did and sew it on the machine. You will see a bit of a seam, but it hardly matters to your piggies. And that is the end. The bed is all finished, and if you've been following along, then well done on creating your slipper snug. And now is the best bit. You get to see what your piggies think, and of course the herd behind me are going to get this one, so let's see what they make of it. Hi piggies! Do you want to see something new? Excuse me, Roxy. There we go. Wow, it looks so cool. Completely oblivious. Here we go. There we go. Phoebe. Yeah, she's a good one. She's a good egg. Is that nice? Oh, Roxy's realised what's happening now. It's nice and spacious in there, isn't it? You're detracting away from the bed, I think, with all this romancing. What's that? Oh. It's official, even Nacho fits with his massive hair. She sneaked in when we weren't looking, didn't you? And if you're watching this and thinking you'd like to have a go at using the pattern, which is 100% designed, digitized and written by just me, then I'll put the link down to the Etsy listing below. If you do choose to purchase it, then thank you so much for your support. It's the 4th pattern I've created, and you can find the other 3 in the shop, which are a cuddle cup, a Heidi hut and a snuggle sack, and I'll also pop their videos down in the description as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, everyone, and let me know, what do you think of the slipper snug? Is it something your piggies would like, and would you like to give it a go at making one? Or perhaps you've been following along with the tutorial. If so, let us know how your bed turned out. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!